What if I told you that Persia never truly vanished? It simply changed its name. Why would a nation with thousands of years of recorded history choose to erase its identity before the world in the middle of the 20th century? Today we will travel through magnificent empires, brutal invasions, and decisions that rewrote the memory of an entire people. This is not merely the story of a country. It is the story of how power, religion, and public image can alter the destiny of an entire civilization. Imagine a land encircled by towering mountains, scorching deserts, and ancient trade routes where more than merchandise traveled. Identity, power, and legacy flowed along them as well. That land is the Iranian Plateau, a strategic crossroads that has been for millennia the cradle of civilizations. But how did it all begin? And who were the true architects of what we now know as Iran? To understand that, we must travel back to the second millennium before Christ. The Indo-Iranian peoples arrived as nomads speaking Indo-European languages, distant relatives of those who centuries later would speak Latin, Greek, or even Portuguese and Spanish. Their language shared nothing with Arabic, which many today mistakenly associate with Iran. In Old Persian, mater meant mother, and pater meant father, echoes that still resonate in Latin as ma and pater. They were not merely sounds. They were the roots of a distinct, ancient, and deeply layered culture. Among these peoples, two groups stood apart: the Medes and the Persians. The Medes settled in the northwest of what is now Iran. They were powerful, organized, and quickly established, themselves as the dominant regional force. The Persians, on the other hand, settled further south in a region called Pars, from which the name Persia would eventually originate. It was fertile land, strategically positioned, yet not especially powerful at first. No one could have foreseen that this people would be the ones to permanently alter the course of history. At that time, Persian was merely a narrow geographic designation, did not represent the entire region, much less an entire civilization. The true center of power belonged to the Medes, who founded the first major empire in that part of the world, long before the name Persia would be spoken in foreign courts or written into history books. But change was approaching. In the midst of those mountains and plains, a man would be born whose ambition would shatter the structures of the past, a leader who looked beyond divided tribes and envisioned unprecedented unity. His name was Kurush, known to the world as Cyrus the Great. With him began the era of the first empire that dared to conquer not only lands but hearts. Before Alexander, Napoleon, or Genghis Khan dreamed of conquering the world, there was a man who did it first and did it differently. While the empires of the ancient Near East imposed their rule through destruction and exile, Cyrus the Great built an empire on a revolutionary idea, governing through respect. After defeating the Medes, Cyrus did more than unify peoples. He founded the Achaemenid Empire, a political structure that instead of spreading fear, cultivated loyalty. Rather than imposing a single language or religion, he protected the temples of conquered peoples, honored their gods, and allowed their cultures to survive and flourish. For the Jews exiled in Babylon, he was not an invader, but a liberator. For the Babylonians, not an enemy, but a restorer chosen by their own god Marduk. Cyrus did not proclaim himself the envoy of a Persian deity. He cleverly presented himself as the chosen one of the local gods of each territory he absorbed, and worked with extraordinary efficiency. Under Cyrus and his successors, especially Darius I, the Persian Empire stretched from the banks of the Indus River to the shores of the Aegean Sea, from Egypt to Central Asia, in less than a century. They absorbed the great empires of the ancient world and transformed them into provinces. Egypt, Babylon, names that had once dominated recorded history, now answered to Persepolis. But their greatness was not measured only in territory. This empire developed a vast network of roads connecting thousands of miles, a messaging system of remarkable speed, a bureaucracy that did more than control. It administered, recorded, and negotiated. It was a masterpiece of diplomacy, strategy, and pragmatism. Many historians call it without hesitation the world's first true superpower, yet the balance between cultural tolerance and centralized power was always fragile. Like a rope stretched tightly across the empire, it required only a single blade to sever it. That blade came riding from the west, carried by an ambitious young man named Alexander. What was about to unfold was not merely a military conflict. It was a collision between two worlds, in the year 334 before Christ. A disciplined army crossed the Hellespont, heading east, led by a Macedonian king not yet 30 years old. His name was Alexander, and the world would come to remember him as Alexander the Great. His goal was not simply territorial conquest. It was to avenge Greece, humiliate Persia, and perhaps become eternal. He came close to achieving all three, in a series of decisive engagements at Granicus Issus, and finally, Gaugamela, the Persian army was shattered. The Achaemenid Empire, which for generations had dominated half the known world, collapsed beneath the assault of a young man with the conviction of a god. But the most surprising element was not his military triumph. It was what he chose to do. Afterward, Alexander did not destroy Persia. He did not erase it from the map. He admired it, studied it, and in a profound sense became it. He married Persian princesses, wore Eastern garments, participated in Zoroastrian ceremonies, and began presenting himself as the rightful heir to the Achaemenid throne. He preserved the Persian bureaucracy, governed from Persian palaces. To many Greeks, this was unforgivable. Within his own army, this cultural transformation unleashed deep resentment. Generals and soldiers raised on Hellenic ideals saw his conduct as betrayal, and they not cross the Hellespont to defeat Persia, to liberate Greece from the Eastern yoke. Now their commanders seemed to have fallen under the spell of Persian luxury, splendor, and spiritual grandeur. But Alexander held a broader vision. He understood that ruling a vast empire was not a matter of swords alone. It required symbols, legitimacy, and cultural fusion. He dreamed of a universal civilization where East and West could coexist and perhaps flourish together. Perhaps he wanted to be more than a Macedonian king. Perhaps he wanted to become eternal. His sudden death in 323 before Christ at the age of 32 left that dream incomplete. With no clear successor, his empire was divided among his generals. The central portion of the former Persian Empire fell to the Seleucids, descendants of Seleucus, one of his commanders. But Persia as an idea did not dissolve. It simply entered a long sleep, awaiting the dynasties that would reawaken it. When the empire fractured after Alexander's death, the ancient Persian heartland never ceased to be contested. Though rulers changed frequently, the cultural identity of the territory continued to pulse with vitality. It was only a matter of time before new Persians would reclaim their inheritance. Thus arose the Sassanids, a dynasty born in the very province where it had all begun. Fars, they claimed descent from the Achaemenids and deliberately restored many of their ancestral traditions. Under their rule, Zoroastrianism, centered on the god Ahura Mazda, was reaffirmed as the state faith. Temples rose once more, culture flourished, and Persia again became an empire that commanded the respect and fear of neighboring civilizations. But no power endures forever. In the 7th century, a new force was emerging from the Arabian Peninsula, Islam, and it did not arrive as a visitor, it came as a conqueror. Within decades, Arab armies had defeated the Sassanids and seized control of the former Persian Empire. With them came new beliefs, a new administrative language, and an entirely restructured political order. Zoroastrianism was gradually displaced by Islam. Arabic became the language of religion and governance. Persian began absorbing new influences, adopting words, structures, and philosophical frameworks from its conquerors. But the Persian soul did not disappear. It persisted in poetry, in the sciences, in architecture. And in the subtle way, Persian culture absorbed the new without abandoning the ancient core. In the centuries that followed, the region passed through Turkic, Mongol, and various Persian dynasties. The Buyids at one point controlled Baghdad itself, the center of the caliphate. Then came the Seljuks, the devastating Mongol invasions under Genghis Khan, campaigns of Tamerlane, and various Turkoman states that fought relentlessly over every inch of territory. It was a turbulent era, a chessboard where power shifted without warning. Yet within that relentless storm of conquest and replacement, something began to solidify. A Persian identity that, though Muslim, distinguished itself clearly from the Arab world. That distinction would grow deeper under a dynasty that would not merely restore political unity, but permanently transform the religious character of the region. The Safavid dynasty emerged with a clarity of purpose that separated it from every previous ruling house. They were not simply another lineage seeking power. They carried a specific vision: to unify the territory under the banner of 12 or Shia Islam. Until their arrival, the Islam practiced throughout the region had been predominantly Sunni, as in most of the Islamic world. The Safavids decided to change this, forcing the conversion through determined restructuring of society and religious institutions. It was not a gentle plea.